What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about the Fear and Greed Index, and what you should be watching for as time goes on for the market approaching tomorrow. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, in just about 2.5 weeks from now. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. Just know that something very interesting is going on right now. We are seeing a lot of buyers that are continuing to defend the markets, but we're approaching the psychological 600 area on SPY, and we're very close to 6,000 on ES and many of our other index funds out there. So the question now remains, will we see some kind of pullback from there, or will the market continue to break out? I'll talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. But just know this, guys, okay? Tomorrow is going to be Veterans Day. It's going to be a federal holiday, but the market's still going to be trading. So only the bonds market's going to be closed, which is going to likely kind of drag some volume away from the markets. But the New York Stock Exchange is going to remain open. That means that tomorrow, I think the market will see trading, but it's going to be a little bit slower as there's going to likely be less volume and less people trading as it's going to be a holiday. However, despite that, just remember this: for Tuesday, we have some more data coming out. We have very important amounts of Fed speakers who are going to be giving us more insights on what they see for the economy, especially Kashkari, who tends to be a more contentious figure. And then for Wednesday, don't forget we have CPI data coming out. That's going to be very important for the Fed's policies. So we'll see how that ends up affecting the markets. Then we also have more Fed speakers. For Thursday, we also have PPI data coming out, not to mention the big guy, Jerome Powell, is giving a speech. And then finally, for Friday, we have not really much data, just some manufacturing numbers. That may also cause some volatility. So that's what's happening for the week. But just know that we're starting off on a very, very low end because there's not really anything significant coming out tomorrow because of the holiday, because of Veterans Day. So don't expect any data reactions tomorrow. I'm not seeing much that's coming out. As far as the sentiment goes for the market, there's still a lot of greed that's present. There's been a lot of buyers stepping in. However, we've pushed so hard. So the market saw this big sell off approaching the election due to some fears and uncertainties. And you guys can see that right after the election, the market absolutely skyrocketed to new all time highs, which is just insane. And, right now, the trend has continued. There's no sign of it stopping quite yet. But I do want to mention that we are hitting a very important psychological point that could lead to a potential pivot. So we'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. But despite that, there is still a lot of greed that's present. So that suggests that even if we do get some kind of pullback, it's just a minor pullback, meaning it does not mean the market's crashing. It does not mean the market's going to take a massive hit. It could just be a small dip that eventually leads to a bigger bounce. So just keep that in mind. But that's what I'm basically seeing. So please keep that in mind, guys. That's what I believe is going to be the most likely move. So that basically tells us that if we do get some kind of pullback, there's still going to be buyers that defend us eventually, and the market still remains bullish for the end of the year. Just because we get a small dip tomorrow, if that does end up happening, do not turn into a perma bear. The buyers are still around. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. The market remains bullish for the end of the year. On top of this, momentum is still at extreme greed. So now that it's at these extremes, that does tend to signify that we're near like some tougher resistance, especially as we're at that $6,000 area on the S&P 500. Could we get a dip from there? Yes, it's possible we get a small dip, but I do believe buyers will eventually come back. The puts and call option ratio started going up, so people started shorting the market to oblivion as we approached the election. People were buying puts, they were shorting, believing there was going to be some kind of crash. Instead, we got the opposite because now we're starting to see the ratio going down because a lot of these shorts got squeezed. They're starting to close their shorts and then they're hedging. They're hedging by going long. So they're hedging their closed shorts positions by going long. And that's also what's been driving the market up towards new all-time highs. Now, the one thing that's very interesting to me is the VIX. The VIX has been dumping. It's now in a more neutral position. But here's the thing about the VIX. We're approaching a very, very important support between 14 and 15. I'll show you guys that in just a couple of minutes. Could we get a bounce there, a temporary bounce? Could that signify the market's about to see a small dip? Maybe. Or will the opposite happen? We'll just have to wait and see. So we'll give that some time. The last thing I want to talk about is this. For the earnings calendar, just know that tomorrow we have Monday.com announcing its earnings. Then we have some minor retail. Same thing again during the after hours. Very, very minor earnings overall. For Tuesday, we have Shopify, the Home Depot, Hertz, and a few more like SoundHound. Very, very minor earnings. For Wednesday, we have, let me just double check this, minor earnings as well, nothing too crazy, just like Cisco and a few more. For Thursday, we have Walt Disney, though that's going to be the biggest one of the week, alongside Friday's Alibaba announcements. That's going to be having a bigger effect on China and many different tickers affiliated with China. So just keep that in mind, guys. This is what the earnings calendar looks like for the week. More minor earnings, but it becomes more serious towards the end of the week as we have Disney, not to mention Alibaba. So with that being said, let's focus now on what the charts are telling us. What do I think is going to pan out from here? So one thing worth mentioning is the fact that when you look at the 4-hour time frame on SPY formed a little wick right over here, which could be a signal that we're getting kind of like a liquidity that's being grabbed here. And that tends to signify a little bit of a dip that could be coming, at least historically. And if you don't believe me, we can actually go back in the chart and look at more examples of this. I'd have to go really far down, though, because the market's so high. It's very elevated at these all-time highs. Another example is like right here, guys. So we formed this wick right over here, and we saw a little bit of a dip on SPY before it continued to consolidate. When you form a wick here, you get like a green bar of wick and then a rejection, right? This happened many, many times historically when we're like about to see a little bit of a dip. Right here, right? We got this green bar, nice little wick. Then we got a little bit of a dip before it continued to go higher. So that's what I'm trying to say about this market. We could do the same thing right here. We formed this wick, and we're possibly getting a rejection here because of this liquidity sweep. So not a guarantee, though. It depends on our levels. That's why I always want to go over levels just to be safe. So for SPY, if this tries to push up and we hold above 598, we have the potential to retest 600. Break 600, we're looking for 602. As long as we're above 600, this will still remain bullish. And there's no sign that it would be done if we just hold above 600 for at least 4 hours. Especially if we get a close above 600, this will remain bullish. So just keep that level in mind. If we're bearish, what you want to see is SPY not only lose this support, but we're looking at this wick down here, which is where the 4-hour candlestick happened to be. So if we lose 597.5, I think we easily start dumping to the 596 area down here, and then our imbalance will be our next target in the 595s. So will we get a rejection and we lose 597.5 to start dipping closer to 595? Or do we hold above 598 and push for 600 to remain more bullish? My gut is telling me that because of the fact that, we have Veterans Day, typically there's less volume, the odds favor that this is going to try to push in the morning just a little bit, then volume slows down. This might start dipping just a bit closer to 595, but then at the end of the day, it might actually try to rebound and get a very, very flat close. Either that or we're going to get a very choppy day, but I do favor that a little bit more. We're going to get a little bit of a dip before we try to rebound again. I find that to be the most likely case. Now, if we don't hold above 595.5, there is going to be a risk of us coming all the way back down to like 592 to this next imbalance down here. But I'm not going to worry about like a 6-point dip yet. I wouldn't necessarily call that yet unless we lose 595. So for now, the most likely move is we kind of push a little bit upon our open. Then after the first 30 minutes or so, the market starts to slow down as volume slows because of Veterans Day. And there might be a little bit of a dip to about 595 into the 595 area. We could still bounce off of that support as we're going to likely see some buyers defend it, but that's the most likely case for SPY in my personal opinion. But just to be safe, guys, always remember that I am not a fortune teller. I can't predict everything that's going to happen. So you have to watch your levels just to be safe, just in case something unexpected happens. That's why you always need to be prepared, because as traders, we're always going to be adaptive to different environments. So for ES, check this out, guys. So we just barely got above that 6,000 area, but that's a very psychological level. If we hold above 6,000 and we continue to push, we're going to be looking for 6,040 as our resistance, and eventually 6,060 is coming next. If we end up dipping, we're going to be looking for this support right here around very close to 6,000, 6,000 to 6,010. Like this range is our support. If 6,000 fails us, we're going to be dipping back down to about 5,980, then 5,950. So keep those levels in mind. I presume the most likely case for ES is going to be this. We start off with a little bit of a push to grab some liquidity. Then we're going to be dipping back down to at least 6,000. So I do see a little bit of a dip that's coming. Maybe a little bit lower. It depends on if 6,000 holds or not. If not, we could be looking for this target right here where our 20 EMA happens to be. And even if we do get a small dip, like I said before, there's still a lot of greed in the market. So the market could still just get bought back up very, very quickly. We pumped really hard last week, so it does make me presume that there might be a dip coming. But just to be safe, make sure you watch the levels I called out. As far as Tesla goes, Tesla's very bullish. Now, I just want to say that Tesla's been very, very unusual. And what I mean by that is if you go back on the chart, we're at the highest we've been since 2022, or like very, very early 2022. We had tough resistance at 300. The last time we hit that, we rejected. Tesla breaks past it. Then we have tough resistance around the 310 areas, the very, very low 310s. Instead of slowing down there, we just broke past it. So it just goes to show how strong Tesla could be. It's very resilient ever since the election with Elon Musk getting involved in politics. Tesla remains very, very bullish. If we were to lose 320, we're looking for a potential target at about 316. This 315 to 316 area is going to be coming next. If that fails us, we're looking for 310. And if that fails us, we get closer to 300. So make sure you watch those supports all the way down to about 300. If you break past 330, we're looking for a potential move back up to about 340. Then 345 and 350 is coming next. I presume what's going to happen to Tesla is this. I think that Tesla is going to attempt to push a little bit more tomorrow morning because it has so much momentum. This thing is just not stopping. It might be retesting 330, maybe it goes a little bit higher, but then because of the holiday and less volume, there is a chance it might slow down just a bit and start to consolidate close to about the 325 area. So it might look for a little bit of a push to 330 plus, come back down to 325, just continue to consolidate. That's the most likely case in my personal opinion. So we'll see how things end up going. For Nvda, we look a little bit weaker here. We need to hold above 150 to turn bullish. If we lose 146, we're looking for a dip back down to 144.5. I think that tomorrow Nvidia pushes a bit to 148, then starts dipping slowly. The most likely case is we dip back down to the imbalance in the 145 area. That's also very close to where our 20 EMA happens to be. So a push and then a dip back down to the 145 before it tries to bounce again. That's going to be the most likely case. For Bitcoin, we remain more bullish. I think that right now we're on a very, very strong uptrend. We're just continuing to pump. 80,000 is remaining a lot more bullish. I think that as long as we're above 80,000, Bitcoin's going for that 82,000 from here. It's very, very strong ever since the election. If we lose 80,000, we're looking for 78,000 as our support near the 20 EMA. So this remains bullish for the 82,000 area. It still looks very, very strong. For NQ, NQ is a little bit more bearish. It is slowing down in terms of its momentum. This could slow down a bit. We'll have to see if we could hold above 21,300 or not. If we hold above that, we could push higher. If not, we might be dipping closer to about 21,100 before it tries to bounce again. So I think what's going to happen is we dip back down to the lows from Friday. 21,100 could be retested before we try to bounce again. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. The QQQ, we remain more bullish. If we hold above 515, we're looking for essentially 517.5. If we reject on 515, can't hold above it, I'm looking for a retest of 512, if not all the way back down towards under 510. So I think what's going to happen to the QQQ is it kind of pushes a little bit more here to the 515s, but then as time goes on, it might slow down back down to 512. A little bit of a pullback before it tries to bounce again. That's the most likely case for the QQQ. As far as Apple goes, it looks bullish. It's forming a very, very nice looking structure, but it might get a small dip first before it tries to bounce again. Why do I say that? Because we're slowing down in terms of our momentum. We also closed just barely at, or a little bit below our 50 EMA. So I think what's going to happen is we dip back down towards the 220, 225s, essentially around that 225 area. We might dip right here and then try to get a bounce back up. So we might ultimately be heading for 230. We might start off with a small dip to 225 and consolidate a bit before it tries to bounce later on. I find that to be the most likely case. For Netflix, we're bullish, but just know we're hitting the psychological 800. So the market's seeing a lot of psychological levels. We have like 515 on QQQ, we have 600 on SPY. Even Netflix is approaching the psychological 800. I'm not sure if we're going to break past that very easily. If we do hold above that, we remain bullish. If it rejects here, we're going to be coming back down towards 788, then eventually this 780 area. So I presume we're going to be dipping back down for basically 780. Then we might try to bounce off that on Netflix. That's going to be the most likely case, so just keep that in mind. On Celsius, we're on a little bit of a downtrend right over here. We're actually looking bearish on the 4 hour, especially after earnings came out. So I think what's going to happen to Celsius is this remains a little bit more bearish. Might attempt to get close to about 30 before it tries to continue to dip. And there's going to be a risk of us coming back down towards the lower 28 for a small move to the downside. I find that to be the most likely case. I pop it in a dip lower. So watch and see if that ends up being the case or not. As far as Palantir goes, we remain bullish as we're making higher highs and higher lows. We will see if we end up continuing to push. I think we're heading for that 60 area, and we'll see how it reacts to that. So look for a little bit more upside on Palantir. It does remain bullish after the big news that came out, especially after earnings. If we were to lose 58, though, we're looking for an attempt to get back over here towards this breakout, which is around the 56.5 area. So look for an attempt to get to 60, maybe a dip after that. It depends on how it reacts to resistance. It depends if we break 60 or not. But I think we head a little bit higher, and then we'll see how it reacts to 60. For Supermicro, this could be forming a nice accumulation, so I do see potential in this chart because we dipped all the way down to 20. It's been crashing the last couple of days, guys. It's been crashing and crashing and crashing even like after its earnings. So If we're bearish, you want to see it essentially lose 24. If that's the case, we're looking for 22.5, then 20 below that. But just know there's a lot of buyers trying to defend at 20. If you're bullish, you want to get back above 26.1. If that's the case, we're looking for an attempt to get back up to 30. This could be an inverse head and shoulders. I'm not trying to be overly optimistic when I say that. Hopefully, I'm not a victim of wishful thinking. But I think that's this could attempt to test 26.1 for a small little push, and we'll see if we get a rejection or not, but I find that to be the most likely case. For Rivian, we're making lower highs right over here, so I wouldn't be surprised if this actually dips a little bit back down. Might see a little bit of a dip. It's been pushing with Tesla very nicely, but just know that we're just range bound for the time being. So it might push a little bit in the morning, look for like 10.8 or so to be retested, which is where we have this imbalance. Then it might start dipping back down for the 10.5 area, maybe a little bit below that before it tries to bounce again, with lots of psychological sideways price actions. Look for a little bit of a push to the higher 10s, 10.7 to 10.8, a dip back down to about 10.5 or below, then a bounce again for some sideways price action. I find that to be the most likely case. We're so far, we're in a very, very strong upturn. We're hitting the 13 areas, our resistance. So if I got a big bounce after the earnings that came out and after some very, very bullish news that came out as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if SoFi continues. We're going to be looking to see if we could break 13 or not. I might attempt to push a little higher for 13.25, maybe above that to 13.5 in that range before it starts to slow down and consolidate. But look for more upside potential. We'll see if 13 holds or not. Overall, it looks very strong, very hot. There's no sign of it being done yet. For the IWM Russell 2000, the Russell has 235 as our support and 238 as our resistance range. I think we just continue to range trade. We're going to hit 238, come back down to 235, just continue to trade sideways for now. I find that to be the most likely case. Unless we lose or break one of those levels, we are just range bound. For AMD, we're on a bit of a dip here. We're looking for an attempt to test 146.96, maybe a little bit below that before it tries to bounce again. Look for a small dip on AMD to 146. It could go a little bit lower depending on if the 20 EMA holds or not. And then we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce. But I do anticipate a little bit more downside, so keep that in mind, guys, before it tries to bounce. For ARM, we're just trading sideways in a range. It's range bound. We like to pump, reject, pump, reject, pump, reject. So I think tomorrow, this is going to be retesting 145.27, if not 143.72. It might be dipping in this range right here before it tries to bounce. I think that's the most likely case looking at the current direction and the fact that we are in a bit of a downtrend. Look for a dip on ARM to the 143 to 145 area, then we'll see if it bounces off that or not. Coinbase is going to likely push with Bitcoin, so it might be going all the way up to 275, if not 280. So coin is looking more bullish in my personal opinion. There's no sign of this stopping, so it remains bullish for the time being. For Amazon, we are looking a little bit weaker here. It depends if we hold 208 or not. Hold 208 and we bounce. If not, we're going to be looking for a dip. I think this chart's favoring that wants to dip a little bit lower, back down to the mid 200s, so like 205 or so before it tries to bounce. So look for some potential downside just temporarily. For other stocks like Meta, we're on a bit of a dip right here. We'll have to see if we break past 590 or not. If not, we're going to be looking for a dip closer to about the 580 area. So I think Meta might be testing 585 and eventually 580 before it tries to bounce. So just keep that in mind. Microsoft's on a bit of a dip. We'll be watching to see if 420 holds. It might be dipping to 420 before it tries to bounce. So watch and see how it goes. Look for a small dip on Microsoft before we continue. For Google, we're actually dipping a little bit more. We'll have to see if we get back above 180 or not. Otherwise, I see a risk of us dipping to 178. If 178 comes, we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce, but I do anticipate a little bit more downside as the most likely case. For others out there, I know a lot of people are talking about GameStop. Let me just talk about that real quick, just for you guys. So it looks bullish. It looks bullish right now. Nice little accumulation is right over here. As long as it does not lose 23.4, I think it favors upside. This looks bullish to me. It's forming a nice accumulation. Look for a dip tomorrow morning to about the 24 area before it tries to break out. I think 26 could be our next target. GameStop's looking pretty good. DJT is kind of flat right now. It's trying to rebound. I think we're going to be testing 34.24, and we'll see if it rejects or not. But this has more upside potential for 34. The VIX is approaching its support right here on the 4-hour time frame near 14 to 15. This has potential to bounce. Unless we lose 14, it has potential to bounce. And it could be on its way back up to like 16. It could signify the market may dip just a little bit after hitting psychological levels. That does not mean the market's going to permanently dip. It just could be a small move. The 10-year is dipping finally. We'll have to see if this continues or not. But for now, it looks kind of bearish. The dollar has not been following the market or like moving the way it typically does. It's not affecting the market as much as before, so I'm not really worried about this. But it does look like it could get a little bit of a push. Might dip a little bit lower, closer to about 104.75 or so, close to its 20 EMA before it tries to bounce again. So we'll see how things end up going. As far as SPY goes, this is looking bullish for now, but we're approaching some tough resistance, so it could turn if we can't crack past 600. There's going to be a big test tomorrow. My gut is telling me it might actually dip a little bit after hitting 600, might be dipping back down to the mid 590s. Then we'll see if we end up bouncing off that or not. But look for a potential dip as the most likely move. With that being said, guys, I really appreciate you guys so much for listening. So please have a great Sunday. I'll see you guys tomorrow before the market opens for another update. Thank you for listening, and peace out.